everybody. So glad to have you with us today. I'm Shawn Vanderhoven. I'm here with my good friend, partner Liz Wiseman. We are broadcasting from the Banana. It's the name of my house in Menlo Park. We named it the Banana because it's narrow and long, and it was yellow when we bought it, like a terrible yellow. We've since painted it white, but it's still affectionately called the Banana. And I just came from the roof because we have skylights in this room, and Menlo Park has been nothing but cloudy, but today it was shining right in my face. So it's literally just 1 minute ago, I was putting a towel up there.
I know, but here's the thing. You are, as is on brand for you, in character, you're in your socks. How did you do up on the roof like 5 minutes ago and in your socks? So were you climbing on the roof in your socks?
No, I just barely took my Vans off of the door.
Okay. Good to be here with you.
Good to, yes, we're so happy to be here with you. Obviously, Liz and I love hanging out together, but now we get to hang out with you. And here's what we're doing today. Today is our 4th episode of Leadership Matters. If this is your first time joining us, we're so glad that you're with us. Here's what Leadership Matters is about. For those of you that are just joining us for the first time, we ask for some questions, a leadership challenge that you're wrestling with. And today we're going to talk about 2 of those that you submitted. Thanks for those of you that submitted challenges to us. But the reason why we're doing the show is because we believe that leadership matters. Think about the leaders who have had a huge impact in your career. And we know that you are dealing with leadership matters that are challenging, and we're looking forward to talking with you about those today. So let's introduce the topic. Liz, kick us off.
Okay, today we are talking about, I think, a perennial challenge of leadership, and that how do you balance performance and people? And this is a huge topic. You know, we're a lot of organizations, I think, are struggling with this balance right now. How do you do both of these well, or what happens when the pendulum swings?
Which it is right now, big time.
It's swinging, and I think coming out of the pandemic, people have been really focused on well-being and people development and making sure people are healthy and whole, and you know, they're part of an inclusive organization. And now we're seeing organizations kind of be a little bit more concerned about performance. And the last thing leaders want to do is create a whiplash between these. And so we're going to look at how do you balance people and performance. I want to start off with just a couple data points. And we're going to be phoning a nerd today. We're going to phone Lauren several times during our session here. Lauren's sick right now. So she's, I'm going to get us kicked off with a couple of the data points that Lauren shared with me as she was prepping for this. She said there's a report from Gartner that found only 41% of workers said that they're consistently giving their best work, which isn't necessarily surprising, but it says in a way that they can sustain over the next year. So it's low, and people are saying, like, I'm not doing my best, and I'm not sure I can keep going. That's like, oh, I'm running a marathon, and I'm not hitting my mile time, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to even sustain this lower performance that I've been at. And then HR leaders found that 96% of their workforce, whatever, met or exceeded their 2022 employee performance targets. But by March of 2023, only 58% of those were confident that they could meet or exceed the expectations for the coming years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So what it's saying is, like, we're in a tenuous situation, and I'm expecting that managers are going to continue to see performance issues, address performance issues, not just maybe with 1 or 2, but maybe on a macro level.
Yeah, put into the chat how many of you are struggling with performance issues. If you're in a position where you can say that, we'll be watching the chat throughout. Anything else that we should highlight?
Well, we're going to take this conversation. This is a big, meaty issue, and this is where, like, the tension really sits. How do you do both of these well? How do you create a great place to work and a great team that people love being part of, but how do you ensure that people are doing great work? Now, we're going to tackle this, as you and I have planned, in 2 parts. This part, we're going to look more micro, like how do you help maybe address a performance issue while also honoring and developing the people on your team? Like, how do you do it so that people are growing and performance is improving where it's lacking? And then part 2, we're going to look at more of the macro issue, which is how do you balance so that you've got both a great place to work and your team is, you know, killing it and doing great work.
Yeah, perfect. Well, let's do it. Let's jump in.
Here's the question we're
Yeah.
going to take on.
So here's what we've done. We have added to the show the 15-minute timer. So we're only going to do 15 minutes per question. I'm going to flip that now.
No.
Oh.
That makes me so nervous. Can we read the question before you flip that, or does that include the reading of the question?
It's including it. We got to go. Let's get the question
Okay.
up. Let's read it. 15 minutes. Here we are. First question.
This is feedback in and of itself, Shawn.
Well, some people have to be managed a bit. I mean, that makes two of us, but you know.
You and I together are a problem. Okay, here we go. Question. This is a question that was submitted by someone. I'm new to management, and I could use some advice on how other experienced managers go about setting clear expectation for their team's performance. Mm-hmm. Okay, so setting expectations on performance, and how do you deal with underperformance? Mm-hmm. And how do you nip behavior or situations in the bud before they escalate? Mm-hmm. We have all been there.
Yeah.
We have all been there. And I know early on in my career, I feel like I spent most of my energy correcting performance issues after they happened. And one of the things I've learned is, boy, you can avoid a lot of it with really clear expectations up front. And, you know, I'm always, there's something that rings in my ears all the time is we went on this camping trip with my sister-in-law's family. They're from the South. They'd come up from Texas to Lake Powell, and we were tent camping in Lake Powell. So this is not high glamour, rent or own a big houseboat. And it's the summer, and it just happens to be like torrential rain, almost like a hurricane. It was rare. And tents are flying everywhere. Equipment, everything has sand in it. It is like just a disaster of a camping trip. And I remember Fronda's father saying, Daryl, he just was like, Fronda, this one in the briefing document. Like, you didn't tell me about this. You didn't warn me about this. And it stays with me is that so much of performance issues can be addressed by getting things right in the briefing document and getting things corrected up front, expectations set up front. So, like, what have you learned about how to set expectations so that it's easy to correct performance later?
Yeah, well, I've got a couple stories, and let me think of one particular scenario that I think is, I just want to bring this up. I think it's really important. So, there's kind of two parts to that remind me of this story. So one is I just signed a deal with a new partner. Do you remember when Nortel Networks was around? They were the phone folks. So this was with Nortel Networks. You know, I'm pretty young in my career as a leader, and I'm leading a team of technical software developers, and Nortel's this big behemoth. You know, they were the kind of the big, you know, private phone equipment provider, and so we submitted this proposal, not passed. So the contract's been let. So we're submitting this proposal on how we want to work with them, and part of this was the test plan. And the fellow that I was working for, really, because he was fairly senior in Nortel, and he was the one guiding all this. His name was Dave Young. And so I submit this kind of proposal on how we want to work for them. And I press send. He gets me on the phone in 5 minutes after this. And he says, hey, Shawn, I want to talk to you about what you just said. And I was like, oh, great. And I expected kind of like, good job. Let's kind of get a little deeper. And he said, no, let me just, right off the bat, I got to let you know that this is completely insufficient. I don't want it to go any further than between you and I, because I want you to succeed. And then he proceeded on that call to just show me what his expectations were, that he was expecting when it came to test plans and strategy and operations and how we were going to integrate our solution into one of their solutions, which was going to scale to thousands of clients. It was about an hour and a half phone call, and I remember getting off the phone feeling a little embarrassed. Truth be told, I wanted to show well. I had a little bit of
doesn't feel good
pride,
to not get it right.
But he did it in such a way where it was just factual. He just wanted to help me understand what Nortel was going to expect from us. And he had the expectations so clearly recorded after he read through and saw what I was missing. He sent it to me, he said, I recommend you print these, take them to all your developers, make sure that they understand these, and then you will succeed with us. And we did. It was just this very quick, there was no judgment in it. It was just, this is insufficient. Let me show you. No personal judgment. There was definitely judgment on the work. What's missing here? Let's talk about how we get this corrected. I sent him back. It took us about a week to fix it. He called me back immediately again as soon as he got it. This time he was in a meeting. He called me back about an hour, 2 hours later, and he said, Shawn, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Here's a few more tweaks. I made those tweaks. We were very successful working with Nortel after that. But man, I thought to myself, wow, he could have just forwarded that on. He could have just exposed how I didn't understand what the expectation was. And so instead, I felt like he did me this great favor. I mean, and for the rest of the time that I worked with Dave, I just felt such a deep respect and gratitude for him.
Right, and I find that so many performance problems are that expectations didn't get established up front, that there wasn't a briefing document, which is like, hey, here's what Nortel is going to expect. So, like, my best guidance for managers, particularly new managers, is get those expectations set up front and get this picture of success that's in your head, out of your head and into someone else's head. My favorite technique for this is the 3 whats, which is, every time you start a piece of work, you should let people know, here's what great looks like. Because most of us have a picture in our head, like, a great job on this looks like this.
Yeah.
Like, let people know what that picture looks like. Here's what great looks like. Here's what done looks like.
And they're different.
They're different because you can be doing great work, but not get all the way across that finish line.
Yeah.
Here's what great looks like. Here's what done looks like. And here's what's out of bounds, meaning don't waste your time over here. But getting that picture from your head into somebody else's.
Who did this well
head.
for you in your career?
Oh, Phil Wilson was this, for me, a beloved boss who just had this really high standard and was clear and let me know when I was missing it. I had a boss, and this is a little embarrassing given this. He was maybe not my best boss I've ever had, but he was really clear. And one time he sat down and he said, Liz, you're being verbose. And it was jarring. Yeah. But it's like this constant voice, which is tighten it up. Tighten it up. So Rand did a really good job of letting me know that. I think other things you could do to establish expectation is define what the job really is.
Yeah.
Because I think we tend to define, like, here's your job title, here's your compensation, here are your responsibilities, here's the job description. But we don't define the job as an outcome, which is like, here's your real job. Like, you're being hired as, a programmer, but, like, what's the real job? Your job is, like, no defects in the code. You're hired as an executive assistant. Like, that's your job, but your real job is to make sure I don't ever miss a meeting. Yeah. Or if you're a chief of staff, like, your real job is so that executive never misses an issue. But if we can, and I think the best way to do it is to define the job as, like, a problem solver.
Yeah.
And when we do that and we say, here's, like, great, and here's the outcome, then people can be successful.
I was doing this project working in the Department of Defense, and there was a lieutenant colonel that had this. He would, whenever something came from the general, there was this general named General Vi who would ask for jobs to be done. And then what this general would do is this lieutenant colonel would bring us all together and say, what's the general really asking for here? Yeah. And it's paused us to slow down and go, oh, you mean just don't read for face value what's in this request and go jump into the work. He wanted to explore and help us explore what are the questions that we should be asking. Why does he want this? What will it look like when we'll know that we've succeeded?
Here's what we're really, really trying to do. And so when you get those expectations set, that job really defined up front, a lot of the performance problems go away. But then I think it's important as a leader to know that when you're holding someone accountable, you're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
And I remember I was coaching this one executive. He was like a chief information officer, and I interviewed a bunch of people who had worked for him as part of this feedback process to help him grow as a leader. And I remember so many, maybe even everyone on his team, said, we wished he held us accountable. Like, he's the nicest guy in the world. And he's good to work for, but we wish he held us accountable. And I think, you have to really dig into what's the messaging, because when you don't hold someone accountable, what are you essentially saying?
Yeah, well, when somebody doesn't hold me accountable, right off the bat, I don't think that they care. And so then I wonder if I'm playing a game. I get suspicious pretty fast. Because I'm like, well, what if they don't? if I turn something in and maybe they didn't hold me accountable to a standard or they didn't even follow up on the work, I'm immediately thinking, well, then what is it that they want from me that would get their attention? Because I want to show up and do something that I know is useful. You don't know if you're useful unless you're held accountable for the things that you're being asked for.
Right. Yeah, and when you hold people accountable, what you're saying is your work matters. We can't get this done without your piece. Like your piece is really important. You matter. You're an important part of the team. And I think that's what people were saying is we wish he held everyone to a high standard. So set expectations, hold people accountable. You're doing them a favor. You're telling them their work is important. And then like when it comes time to address the performance issues, there are some best practices here. Now, I think we've got enough time here. It's making me a little nervous watching the sand tick, but I want to. This is a great time for us to pull in Lauren, who's done some digging into like the feedback process. And before we get Lauren live here, the work that Lauren and I did on impact players, one of the things that we found were there were these ordinary contributors, impact players, and then this group of people we called under contributors. And this was a tragedy as we looked into this because these were people who were smart, hardworking, capable, talented, but yet they were missing the mark. And what struck me as I heard so many managers describe what they considered to be under contributors is these were people who were talented and they thought they were killing it. They thought they were doing a great job, but they were so missing the mark, and what they needed was that kind of feedback to pull them in. I'd love for us to go to Lauren for a minute or two on where does it go wrong, and why is it so important to get feedback right to correct performance. Lauren.
Hi. Feedback interviews became a really common standard part of the workplace kind of by the mid 20th century, and it was accepted that they were important and useful. But in the mid 90s, there was a study that was published that looked at feedback interviews and measurable performance ratings. And what they found was that actually the modal or the most common effect of a feedback interview was actually no effect at all. And that fully one third, actually a little more than one third of feedback interviews um, decreased performance afterward.
Ouch, ouch.
And so this obviously sparked some cognitive dissonance. Like this is an important thing. We all say we need this to improve, and yet the numbers show that it's not. And there was a lot of work following that has really dug into like what makes feedback effective and how can this actually benefit people and organizations. And there are two particular studies that I want to tell you about really briefly. The first was one where some professors studied feedback providers and feedback recipients. They gave them each a survey after a feedback session, and they asked them about three things. They asked them about the accuracy, like, is this feedback true? Give us a percent. Like, this is 87% true. They asked them about the provider qualifications. Like, is this person qualified to give this kind of feedback or make this assessment? And they asked about the reasons for it, asked them to assign, like, how much of this had to do with, your skills or the situation or things you couldn't control or your talents. And what they found was that when feedback was positive, providers and recipients were in really high agreement in terms of qualification and accuracy and do we feel like these were internal or external reasons. But when it was negative feedback, the recipients' ratings dropped significantly. They were very quick to discount the accuracy of the feedback, the qualifications of the person giving it, quick to blame external reasons, and work like this has really come to show the strong connection there between like the relationship that exists and the objectivity of the observations when we head into a feedback interview.
Lauren, thank you for that. Like my takeaway on that is if you're going to give feedback, get it right. And particularly if it's negative feedback. Positive feedback, I think we can be looser with, maybe a little sloppier with. I want to share just a couple things I've learned about getting this right. Number one, separate the people and the performance. And it's, it's so easy to think I'm giving this person feedback. I've got to tell them something that they're doing wrong. And it's like, no, you're giving feedback to their performance, to their work, not to them. It's also a really helpful way to receive feedback, which is, wow, I've got information coming about my work. I think what's also helpful is thinking about it. Maybe I'll like two metaphors that help me. And then, Shawn, I'd love to hear a metaphor that helps you is,
Oof.
what do we do?
We are spent. Do we move on or do we keep going after this first
Okay,
challenge?
so we've got a second question, and it also has to do with like, how do you give tough feedback and still be considered a considerate person? So let's put it to vote. Can we do this on chat? Like, do we?
Yeah, throw in the chat if.
The options are move on to the second question and split our time evenly, or a little bit more on how to give feedback.
All right, we're looking. Keep going.
This makes me nervous.
Finish the feedback dialogue. Keep going. Keep going. Move on. Oh, there's a couple. Move on.
Move on.
I want to
Shawn,
know.
you're the boss.
Let's do this. Let's integrate. What we have, let's integrate in this next because I think there's an opportunity to do it.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold. I've got something that I want to share as well. Let's get that next challenge up on the screen, and let's read it off. You good with that?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good.
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you everybody for your votes. I think that we went. I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of people that are angry with me right now because there were more keep goings than move ons.
No, we're good. I've got two metaphors that I want to share, and I'm going to figure out a way to do this.
I have no doubt. Okay, next challenge. Here it is. Challenge 2. The problem is that I'm a considerate person by nature. Even though I don't let anyone walk all over me, I'm too considerate with employees which could be perceived as weakness. I know bosses, or even some bosses I've had over the years, don't hesitate to push their boundaries and are more demanding and don't much concern themselves with being considerate. Any advice?
Okay, this is one where I know a lot of people probably struggled with this one. I think, Shawn, we need to talk about, and very directly and honestly, about the downsides of being nice.
Yeah.
And I want to start by talking about it in terms of diminishing, like how, I can't tell you how many companies I've come into, and some of them are in the Midwest, like they got some Midwest nice, but it happens all around the world, and they're like, oh, we actually think the kind of diminishing we have here is nice diminishing, not this kind of mean-spirited, bossy know-it-all. So maybe let's start on chat. Like, how do you end up diminishing people's contribution, capability, and performance? Because we're really focused on how do you balance people and performance in this issue. How do you end up diminishing people's ability to perform at high levels by being nice and considerate?
While you all start, I can think of a nice diminisher that it was one of the hardest diminishers I've worked for because everybody loved them so much. It was confusing. So let's see what people say. Okay, nice diminishers. Nice plus nothing inside me cares enough, Chuck says. Nice without being honest about performance is a detriment. Thanks for that. I think it's Kaylee. Elizabeth says, you may think that you're being nice when you don't confront, but it's nicer to give the truth. Okay, keep them rolling. I'll be watching this. Liz, what do you think about this?
Well, I think, we found that their diminishing comes in a bunch of different varieties, and there is the like tough, mean-spirited, just tell people they're doing a bad job for sport kind of diminishing. But we also found that the protective form of diminishing, the mama bear, the like, you know what, I am going to shelter people. I'm going to protect them.
I'll take the tough ones. I'll take the hard challenges.
Yeah, and like, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to hurt them. And, I think often women feel a little bit more pressure to not be, deliver some of that tough feedback. So how do you break through this? We found that the multipliers that we studied and that we continue to learn about and teach about had both this kind of warm side, like maybe a soft side, empowering, caring, supporting, developed people, listened, trusted, but they also had this hard edge. And the things that we found on the hard edge. Well, I mean, John, what was your experience on the hard edge of multiplying leaders?
Just telling you the truth about if my work was meeting the standard. No hesitation. Just very quick to say, hey, listen, this doesn't cut it. Let's talk about the reasons why. I had an experience with you that way. I sent you some work at one point. You emailed back, said, hey, this doesn't meet the standard. Let me tell you why. Can you address it? It was so useful to me. And then not only did I finish it in that project, I went and researched ways that I could crush that same kind of work in the future. So it gave me it captured my discretional effort. Because I thought to myself, oh yeah, not only is that a gift that I'm getting this truth, it's showing that I have a weakness here in my ability to contribute. And so I made sure that I really got into it.
Yeah, I mean, we found that even these multipliers that were a little bit more on the tough, hard edge, like held people accountable, high standards, told people the truth, gave people the hard truth, the hard facts, people ended up oozing love and affection for them.
People. Yeah.
Yeah, and I look back on some of my multipliers who were pretty tough people.
Yeah.
And these were not people who put their arm around me and said, gee, Liz, we really care about you. You're so important. And thank you so much. They were people who gave me really hard things to do and expected me to do it and told me when I was off. I often talk about Ray Lane being this incredible multiplier to me, but I remember one time I made a real judgment of error and Ray kind of laid into me. I had misused his time. And he was like, no, this is not okay. And bad call there. And I never did it again. And I loved working with him and felt like I was just at my best around him. So one of the things that I want us to focus on in our time that we've got is like, how do you build a reputation as a kind but demanding leader?
Yeah.
And I think one of them we've hit, which is establish those expectations up front.
Yeah.
I've got a brother-in-law who's a movie director, and one of the things that he and I love to talk about is how in a movie or, a screenplay, a movie, maybe it's a letter, maybe it's a book, like you have, and let's focus on a movie. You have like 5 minutes in a movie to establish the rules of the movie. And people can fly, teleport themselves, transfer in time, sprout wings, and do whatever. Like all those things can happen.
But you gotta have
later.
it, right? 5 minutes.
You got 5 minutes to establish the rules of how this universe works.
Yeah.
But you can't introduce that later because then it's like a convenient plot mechanism. Yeah. And so all that's got to be established up front. And so if you're considerate by nature and you're kind, like use that first block of time with someone to establish the performance reviews. Like kind of, here's what the job is. Here's what I expect. And you can almost establish anything up front and it's not considered unkind.
And it gives you the ability to do even if it's part 1.5 or part 2, I'm not sure, but there was this fellow that was a manager in a company that I worked at. His name was Brett. He was so nice. Everybody loved Brett. But after people would turn work into him, he would have what he called the "is this awesome" conversation. Here's how it worked. He'd sit down, he'd connect with everybody. I mean, he hated conflict. He was introverted. He was a little quiet, very warm. Sales leaders tended to think that they could get the best of Brett because he seemed so soft, but actually he was very resolute. And so when anybody would turn in work to him, he would have this conversation where he'd bring them together and he'd say, he'd connect with everybody, find out how they were doing, what's tough in their lives, and then he would ask, hey, I just want to go through this last deliverable. I want to figure out, is this awesome work? And he would just let the team, kind of go around it, provide their own critiques and criticism. He would hardly say anything. And they would tend to come up with 5 or 6 things they were going to fix and then exit. But he was the nicest guy in the world, but he would never accept work that the team didn't conclude was awesome.
Right, and I love that because it's a question. It gives people a chance to self-reflect on that, and it's gentle,
Mm.
but it's also a catchphrase of his, right? And so you're known for it, and so it's a way to like let people know I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to let you self-evaluate this. I might have an opinion on it, but it's a go-to thing, and maybe there's a way that you can have your own version of
Mm.
that. Like, hey, is this your best work? Should I take it from here? Is this awesome? Another maybe a metaphor for thinking about how to be a considerate person, but also be seen as a tough and a demanding and a fair kind of boss is to think about a really great professor and what that professor did when you came to the professor with like a legitimate reason why you couldn't turn in the paper, like maybe something had happened, you were really sick, maybe you had a family emergency. Like what the best professors don't do is say, sorry, your problem, not mine.
Mm.
They also don't say, oh, well, it's okay, you don't need to turn in the
Yeah.
homework for
Yeah.
this class.
Yeah.
They come up with something that offers some grace,
Yeah.
but still holds you accountable.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Go to your kids' thing,
Mm.
but I need this on Wednesday
Yeah.
morning, not Tuesday night. Or, they offer you a little bit of grace, but they still hold accountable. I think that's a metaphor
Yeah.
that allows you to still care about the development and
Yeah.
well-being of people, but
Yeah.
expect people to do the work.
And it gives you courage because, so I was just thinking about my professor, thank you, and I was doing my senior paper. I was a history major, and I tore my rotator cuff and my labral tendon and had to have surgery. And so, I'm in this one of these, devices where I'm strapped up. I can't sleep at night. I've got 3 little boys. My wife did most of the work, okay, with the 3 little boys, but like I can't take credit for that. But I'm trying to do my best to contribute to these little boys' lives. I'm going to school full time. We're trying to sort out life, and I'm strapped to this thing, and I'm supposed to write this 30-page paper. And I go to my professor, and I'm like, I felt like I wanted to cry a little bit. I was in a lot of pain. I wasn't sleeping very well. And it's in the middle of this term. The only class that I had was the senior paper, and I'm in the middle of it, and I've got all the research done, and everything's outlined, and I go to him and I say, hey, listen, I can't type. Like there's nothing. What do I do? And he just kind of listened. Was like, man, that would really be a bummer, but at the same time, he said, but I don't want to rob you. You can't. I mean, I don't want to rob you of what you owe yourself and me for the term paper. So he asked me what I thought I should do. Maybe I should go think about it. And he said, essentially it was like, well, listen, we could come up with something, but do you really want that? Or is there a way for you to figure out how to work with this arm? I went back, talked to my wife. She encouraged me like, no, hey, you can do this. I kind of took courage, went back to him and said, hey, listen, I'm going to try to just dictate for a little bit until I can type. He was like, listen, I will be available to help you. But in the end, he actually held me to the same exact standard that he was going to hold to me anyways. But he gave me courage. He wasn't giving me a partial out, but he gave me courage to just face it, to do the problem solving. And then all of a sudden, I just felt like, no, I can do this. I can overcome this challenge. It wasn't the mindset that I had when I first came to him. That little bit of grace and that interest in me gave me the ability to kind of just go for it. And I really did well on that paper.
Sometimes all people need is knowing there is a way out, that there is a safety net, that there is some grace that could be extended to say, like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this hard thing. The other thing I would think about in this situation is, person said, I'm a considerate person by nature. And I think if that is you, and you are like naturally kind, empathetic, and considerate, is let's dig into the word considerate a little bit. Like, what does it mean to be considerate? Like, I looked up the definition of this, and one is to be careful not to hurt others. Whew, well, that can really take you down a path of ignoring performance problems, not giving people challenge, not holding people accountable. But then there's also a second definition, which is showing careful thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, maybe redefine considerate as someone who is thoughtful, like thoughtful about extenuating circumstances, thoughtful about the evidence, thoughtful about data, thoughtful about what's best for people in the long term. And I think when we define ourselves as considerate in that way, it totally changes our orientation to feedback and to performance, and how do you help people perform at their best.
Oh, That idea of consideration is so powerful. I was a sixth grader and I made a state select hockey team, not because I was great, but because normally 80 people try out for the 20
Or
spots on
maybe
the
you
team,
were.
and 21 kids showed up for the tryout. So 20 kids are going to be taken for the team. Normally there was 80 that would try out. 21 kids.
The odds
showed
were
up.
ever in your favor.
I was 20th. I was selected 20th on the team. So we get into the practice, and there was a coach who was considerate to me. He recognized, he pulled me aside at the beginning of the season, and he said, Vanderhoven, you can't stick handle with your head up. And it's one of the things that you have to do to become a good hockey player is to be able to handle the puck while you're watching. You can't have your head
handle.
down.
I mean, handle the stick.
You can't. If you can't stick handle, if you can't handle the puck with your head up, then you're gonna have your head down, and you're just gonna get
creamed.
You're gonna get creamed. And so he said he's like, this may be embarrassing to you, but for the next couple weeks, I'm gonna have you work with an assistant coach and a few other players on just stick handling with your head up. In those few weeks, I mastered stick handling with my head up, and he put me back up in the lineup, and I did really well. Went on to a different team, scored a lot of goals, had a lot of fun, but it was this consideration that he had for this performance problem that existed. Mm-hmm. He could see that I had a fatal flaw or missing skill.
He considered where it was coming from for you.
Exactly, and then through his consideration, he orchestrated a way for me to bridge that gap.
Yeah. And I think when we say, like, I'm going to be considerate, I'm going to take a broad view of this person, and I'm going to think about what's best in the long term. I'm going to think about what's best for them. I think it poises us to be able to really have hard conversations and to be honest with people and to separate the person and their performance. And I think when we can do that, we can love on the person, but be able to work on the performance.
Somehow we've lost all the sand in this glass.
Okay, well, you know what? I think it's time for us now to really focus on how do you deliver hard information and do it in a way that cares about people and shows consideration.
And while we're talking about this, let's get some suggestions from all of you on chat. How do you, say it again, and let's put some of these thoughts in chat so we can all benefit from the way that you do this. Let's ask it one more time.
Okay, how do you love the person? We're a day after Valentine's Day, so we're gonna love on this. How do you care for the person, but be able to work on the performance at the same time? And I would love to have people share their best strategies, approaches, tools, techniques for doing that.
Okay, go for it. What do you got? I'll watch this.
Okay, I've got two. I think in metaphors, that's probably not a surprise to anyone who's read anything right. It's like how my brain just works. I want to share the metaphor of the thermostat and the metaphor of the note. The note. So the thermostat is, treating feedback not as truth, not as a judgment, not really as feedback, and so thinking a lot less about giving people feedback and thinking a lot more about giving people information. Information that they need to calibrate their performance. And it's, a lot like that game you play when you're a kid. Did you play this game, like cooler, warmer, like they hide? Yeah, hot, cold. Like, okay, Shawn is looking for, the remote that someone is, put into the bathroom trash can, and you've got to find it, and they're telling you you're getting colder, you're getting warmer, and it's a lot like the way a thermostat works. And I think the term feedback actually comes from this kind of mechanical engineering, which is systems that take in information and tell the system, are you off? Like, which direction are you off? The room is too hot, like activate the air conditioning. The room is now too cold, activate the heater. And I think, and the thermostat's not like feeling bad about itself because it's too cold or too warm. It's just constantly recalibrating to get things at the right temperature. And I think when we think that feedback isn't something that's true or not or a judgment, it's just information to help people recalibrate. I think people can receive it because it's one of the things that we found when we asked people, what did your multiplier leader do? They gave me information. What did your diminisher do? they withheld information. You hear it all the time, don't you?
All the time.
It's hard to be at our best when we don't have the information we need to keep recalibrating.
Yeah.
So that's one. What do we got here? And then I'm going to share the director's note.
Mari says, let's see here. When you deliver the negative feedback, put it in context of steps they need to take to become successful. Give them examples of things they could have done differently. Oh, thanks. That is nice.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of this thing I learned from Carrie Patterson when I told him what was wrong about his document as I'm editing his work, and I drop my edits on his desk, and he comes marching back, and he's like, boom, slams it on my desk. Feedback for me. He's like, don't you ever give me an AWK without an FIX. Like, don't tell me what's wrong. Yeah. Like, Liz, I hired you to fix things, and it has stuck with me forever. Well, it's a good lesson for giving someone feedback. Don't point out what they're doing wrong without telling them, here's what you can do to get this on target.
Yeah.
What else?
Here's another one for Jordan. Allow them to set the goals, get their buy-in on those goals, and then add goals you would like them to work on towards improving the areas you believe they need development in. Chris says, if you don't work on performance, you really don't care about the person. I constantly coach to help folks achieve more of their potential. And I think that there's a theme that runs through all of this. And I want to hear about the note, because we haven't heard about the note. Right?
You and I haven't talked about the note.
And we are running on borrowed time right now, so we're going to have to do the note and move on. What I love about this is there's a theme about honesty. Honesty is caring. It's hard to give people the information at times because we do worry that this is going to hurt. But what we've heard throughout this, that you can be considerate, you can be thoughtful, you can even try to deliver the information in a way that you think would most help that individual receive that information well. But the information is necessary. This honesty is absolutely required for people's growth and development. I think that is exactly what's being said there. What about the note?
Oh, the note. Well, this is when it took me a while to figure out what's going on in these conversations. I have this brother-in-law who's a director, and when they're out there filming a movie, and he's working with some top talent in Hollywood. After filming a movie, he would talk about, they look at the dailies, they look at how things are showing up on screen, and then overnight he prepares his notes. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then he talks about giving people notes. And I'm like, and he kept referring to it, giving people notes. Now, anyone who's in theater, has done any musical theater, any acting, probably knows about this practice. But what I came to learn is that this is standard practice, is that as a director is watching performance, they look at the dailies overnight, they then make notes, and then they give those notes to the actor.
Right.
And so imagine what it might be like to be maybe a young director. Some people who are here tuning in with us probably manage people who are more experienced than them, older than them, maybe someone who feels more talented than them. And in some ways we're like, who am I to tell them what they're doing right or wrong? So imagine being a young director, and you've got, who are your favorite actors or actresses?
I was just thinking of one of the actors in one of your brother-in-law's film, Keanu Reeves, right? It was recently he was doing a film with him in it.
Yeah, you're directing Keanu Reeves, and so you have to tell an actor like that where they're doing something different than what you want. And so these directors write notes. And what was surprising for me is that they don't write notes just when things are wrong. It's just a daily practice, which is like director's notes. Okay, we need more of this, less of this. Here's what you're coming off of this. Could you do this? And they just write up their notes and they hand it to them. And it's a regular practice. And I think it's a nice metaphor to say, instead of deciding when something is far enough off that it warrants a sit down and feedback or information, maybe you make it a regular practice to just offer notes oh, I was sitting in watching your presentation, I made a few notes, here you go. And they're not big scary conversations, it's just a regular practice. And they're observations, they're not necessarily true. There's lots of different ways you might play a character. Director's notes.
Love it.
That's my idea.
Challenge 3, let's move on. If we flip, we actually have 15 minutes until we have to close. So this is good. This is the rest of the time that we have on the dot.
Okay.
So let's do challenge 3, and here's it is. Challenge 3 is a leadership challenge. It doesn't have to be in performance versus people. It can be any wrestle that you are having as a leader that you would like to explore, and to put it in as a question in the Q&A into Zoom. And then we're going to give you a few minutes to do this. We can wrap up any thoughts while you all thinking. Put in your questions. And Liz and I are going to play rock, paper, scissors to figure out who gets to pick between us our favorite question that you all have submitted. So put it into QA, into Zoom. Any leadership wrestle, real challenge that you are struggling with right now that you'd love to spend 10 minutes or so talking about with us and your colleagues here on the show.
Okay, are these going to show up in Q&A or chat?
We're going to see those in Q&A show up. So
Okay, I see no open questions.
No open questions yet.
Which people must be thinking and they must be typing
Ah,
because
Natalie,
I don't
thank
know
you.
any leader
Eric,
who doesn't.
they're coming in.
Good.
Okay, Liz. So I don't cheat. You don't get to cheat. You gotta paper rock scissors me first.
Well, I'm reading the
I
questions
know, but
to
you
decide.
can
Okay.
read them and then you can decide. I don't. Okay, best 2 out of 3.
No, you just don't want to do the first one? 2 out of 3? Okay.
2 out of 3. Okay, here we go. Yes.
Okay. No, I want to do the cutting. Don't you play it that way?
Yeah, I forgot though. It's been so long. Okay, here we go.
Ah! Got you.
Okay.
Okay, so I get to pick the
You gotta
question?
pick. Yeah, pick your question.
Ooh. I just looked at Eric's question. How do you keep focus on performance while there are many outside factors changing and swirling around you? Okay, self-awareness of team members' achievements or growth or development. It's okay, that's an interesting. What are performance issues is a personal behavior? For example, a team member who is very defensive or giving feedback from superior or colleague. I want to do that one.
Okay. Whose question was it again?
This is Natalie Hadley's
Okay,
question.
Natalie.
Okay, let me read it
Thanks
again.
everybody for submitting the question. Read it one more time.
Let me read it so I don't mumble through it. And this is one where Natalie, you might have said this for Shawn or me to offer some thoughts on, but this is one that everyone can offer some thoughts on chat. What if the performance issue is a personal behavior?
Mm-hmm.
For example, a team member who is very defensive when given feedback from a superior or colleague. Okay, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And I think the way I would want to go at this is like, what do you do if it's something that's deep inside someone?
Yeah.
That's how I want to kind of approach this question. What if it's not just, gee, you know what, you should have spent more time teeing up the issue in your presentation rather than offering, going right into the meat. Like, okay, that's fine, I can do that. What if it's deeply personal? I want to do, I think this would be a good spot to phone a nerd with Lauren. And we're not going to ask her for data this time. I want to ask Lauren if she would share for everyone how she tells me my writing is bad. So Lauren and I worked together through the whole Impact Players. And, when I first hired Lauren onto the team, I thought she was going to be data scientist and researcher extraordinaire and do our stats. And what I found is she was an amazing reviewer of my work. And I have a short list of people I go to when I want to hear the truth. And for me, there is nothing really more personal than like my thoughts on paper and something I've written. It's like, it can feel like someone's saying like, you're dumb.
Yep.
Like, I don't like your brain.
Yeah.
I don't like your personality. So Lauren, do you want to come in and tell us like how you tell me my stuff ain't great and still I love you so much and I appreciate it so much. I think there's an art form to this, and this starts to get it like where it's deeply personal.
All right, I've got a couple of thoughts here. I'll be interested to hear if it's actually what you appreciate. I don't know that we've really talked about this.
No, we haven't, which is why I think this is fun.
Yeah. So first off, I really try to, when I'm commenting on a piece of writing, not make it like a value judgment of the writing. Like it's not this is good or this is bad. I think of it more like what's working here and what's not working here. And if something isn't working, I try to be as clear as possible about like what actually isn't working here. And I'll add that like that takes thought work to figure it out myself. Like the lazier thing to do would be just to say like something is bad here. But I try and really figure out like what isn't connecting here. And if I have an idea for how to fix it, I'll take a stab at fixing it.
Yeah.
Um, if I if I'm not sure how to fix it, I'll just try and be really clear about the problem. But I try to frame things in both like I guess like gratitude for sharing something really personal with me and also um from the very genuine point of view that like my motivation here is to make the end product really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just to dump on a piece of work.
Mm. And Lauren, you do this so well. And one of the things that Lauren does so well is she sees my intent
Mm-hmm.
and she calls it out.
Yeah.
And so she'll be like, I see where you're going with
Yeah.
this. I think there's a better way to do it. So I don't feel like, gee, I failed, like this is just the wrong direction. It's like maybe I've got the mechanics on
Yeah.
it wrong. And
Yeah.
so it's like, I see what you're trying to do, like that's a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not quite working. And the other thing that she does really well that makes it easy for me to kind of like accept something that feels very personal is she also points out like, hey, this works, this is great, I love this. So when I get to the part where it's like this isn't working, I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like I'm not in a puddle on
Yeah.
the floor. So I think that Lauren does such a great job with this, and we can all be like a Lauren to someone
Mm-hmm.
and help with this. The other thing, and the reason why I was attracted to this question, and Shawn, I want your views on this as well, is a lot of times the things that feel like they're very personal. This is a personal behavior. We as leaders have to remember that people's behavior gets shaped long before we're on a team with them. And that sometimes things that people struggle with, that you're trying to give them feedback about things that they need to change, they got shaped long before they got there. And those things are harder for them to adapt. So I think as leaders, we have to realize like this 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 didn't get created on my watch, and I need to be patient
Mm-hmm.
about how this gets
Mm-hmm.
addressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times people are shaped by earlier bosses they have. I've had so many people say like, I want to be a good leader, I'm trying to do all the good things, I'm trying to be a multiplier, but yet someone isn't responding. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've got something that makes it hard for
Yeah.
them to step up and to contribute and to change and to
Mm-hmm.
accept feedback. Like many of those things got created
Yeah.
by other bosses, and so it takes a little bit
Yeah.
of time to
Yeah,
unwind that.
there's this really important thing that you're saying in there, which is this question on where does this come from? Or why is this here? And just by asking those questions, it automatically puts you into this curious place where you can start doing a little bit of homework. You can start, or you can even approach it delicately to try to, really understand what's the context for this content that I'm seeing.
Yeah. I'm noticing here, Michael says, I start my conversation by asking what's on your mind or what's in the rumor mill. One of the things that we didn't talk about thus far that I think is a linchpin in this, particularly if it's personal, is to make sure you start by sharing your intent.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm hoping to do. I want to see you be successful. Like I see, it's kind of what Lauren does. I see where you're going with this. And when you start with this intent, which is their personal and professional success, it makes it easier for people to address that.
Yeah, there was a psychologist that I really admire. Some people you may know his work. His name's Marshall Rosenberg, and he shared this idea that I think is really important here. And he said that the highest form of intelligence is our ability to separate observation from judgment.
Mm.
And if you think about that idea of just trying to figure out like what's really happening here, what am I observing before we go in and say, oh, such and such, they're so controlling, whatever it is, the things that it's kind of like my knee-jerk reaction to go to some kind of an analysis or a comparison or a judgment, but instead to figure out, no, like what's happening here, and just to download that full scene in observation mode, and then to go to, what are they intending to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And then the final piece of the puzzle is, but what am I hearing? How is this affecting others? And I think that if you have those three pieces of the puzzle, you can just really observe what's happening, what they're attending. So now you can kind of see the gap. The final parts. Well, here's the gap. This is how this is affecting others. If you can lay those parts down, really with a desire to try to help this person, for you to see them and for them to see others, I think already you're in a place where they're much more likely to be able to hear what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's so congruent with what we've talked about, like separating out an observation from a fact, separating information from a judgment or feedback. And I also noticed here, Helena said she uses these prompts. I like, I wish, I wonder.
Yeah.
And that
we had
wonder,
a team member, Alyssa, who did this really well. Anytime you got feedback from Alyssa,
I noticed she did that
she
well.
would say those prompts, and even though I knew what she was doing, I didn't care. It was disarming. I loved it.
Fantastic. Well, we're about at time.
So let's talk a little bit about next month, rather. Sorry.
You scared me.
So next month, we're going to take the conversation into the space of how do you create a team or an organization, a workplace rather, where
it's a great place to work. People feel like they belong, people matter, and it's a place where people do great work. And as we talked about at the top of this conversation, companies have maybe been really focused on well-being and health and culture and environment, and we're seeing a sharp increase in companies that are concerned about performance right now. And I think it puts managers in a tough spot, because you've got to be maybe more performance minded than you've been in the past. And we're going to talk about how do you balance those two and not create whiplash.
Awesome.
And can you do both of them brilliantly? And
it's timely for right now in the situations that we're all in. So we're going to do two things from today's conversation. One, we're gonna just look through our tools of the things that we found researching other leaders. If we find anything that was a real match with today, we'll send out an exercise or two, a multiplier experiment, something that we found to be really useful to do what we're talking about today. We'll also send you out a request for leadership challenges. We're just going to do this kind of natural cadence. We're going to try to collect from you the things that you would like for us to spend a full show doing. It's really been wonderful to be with you today. Listen, leadership matters. The leaders that have influenced our lives the way they have mattered to us, and the problems that you're struggling with matter to your people, that we try to figure out how to do these well. It's been awesome to be with you. Liz, it's always fun. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and happy late Valentine's Day.